We've all had bad dates, right? This is the only date I've had to date that rang every alarm bell and waved every red flag. I'll preface this by saying that I don't go on many dates, but when I do, I make sure that I follow safety protocol by only meeting my date in public places, let either family or friends know where I'm going, and park in a populated place close by to wherever we meet. Anyway, this date initially suggested we meet at his house to watch a movie and have a few drinks, and I said no, I don't feel comfortable with that and I only want to meet in public. He seemed okay with this, but then brought it up a few more times, and I said that if money is an issue, we could meet up another time or forget about it altogether. But my date backtracked and went with my idea of meeting at a cafe I chose that I was familiar with and was equidistant to where we both lived. Anyway, he turns up in a 2-door car. This detail is relevant, and goes into the cafe, and I follow behind and introduce myself. After a polite introduction, things began to get weird. I order a Coke, and he says,
"Don't you want a drink? I was going to pop into the bar,"
which is connected to the cafe,
"and get one."
I say no, I'm not drinking, and he looks at me like, WTF? As if I'm being unreasonable. I already explained in messages that I don't drink as I'm on medication, so having to re-explain it again pissed me off. He seemed disappointed and goes to order a cider from the bar while I get a table. Anyways, we sit down with our drinks, and date immediately goes on about going back to his place again, even though the original plan was to stay here and order food, and I already stated that that was not happening. He says something along the lines of having a few drinks and eating at his place, and I say we don't have to eat, we can just have our drinks and leave. He gets defensive and says that he has money but prefers it if we go back to his. I make a joke and say, "You're not a killer, are you?" And instead of laughing it off, he stares at me uncannily and says,
"You don't think I would hurt you, do you?"
I laughed uncomfortably and said, "Of course not, but really, I'm relieved this date won't be going any further." Date suddenly says,
"Are you going to follow me in your car? Because that wouldn't make sense. How about we go in my car? But I've got packages in the front, so you'll have to squeeze in the back, and I'll drop you back off to your car after."
In reality, that made less sense to me than following his car and driving home from this house. The fact it was completely illogical made it even more creepy in my mind. Every alarm bell was going off at this point. I said, "Look, I don't want to go to yours, and your insistence is giving me the creeps." Date looks shocked, mumbles something about needing the toilet, and excuses himself from the table. A few moments later, I see him through the cafe window, getting into his car and driving off. Massive bullet dodged, in my opinion. Also, the fact that his car didn't have back doors made it even more sinister, because imagine if something happened in the car and I couldn't escape. So about 7 years ago, I had an online date who, after I told him a second date wouldn't be happening, decided to show up at my place of work. Needless to say, after that, I was extremely hesitant to dive back into the pool of online dating. In fact, since then, I can count on one hand the number of men that I've dated from online, but my sister and my best friend have both met men over the last year on an app that connects through Facebook. It's used to help filter out catfishes and also try to find mutual friends of friends that would match what you're looking for in a partner. So over the last month, I've been talking to guys here and there, but hadn't yet really found one I was ready to move beyond text with. Then this guy came along. We chatted in the app and he was really nice and seemed safe. After almost 3 weeks of daily texting, I agreed to a date. For the first time ever, I did not stalk his social media profiles because I wanted to stop self-sabotaging. I tend to dig so deep that I know too much before the date and have already made my decision that there will be no second date. Yes, I am extremely paranoid. So I show up to the first date and it's okay. He's mostly quiet and kind of shy, but polite. I know I have a big personality and can dominate the conversation, so I decide to give him a second shot. As the week leading up to date 2 goes on, I start to get apprehensive and tell myself not to sabotage this. I realize because I didn't want to stalk his profiles, I don't know his last name, so I text him and ask. He seems hesitant to tell me. He asks me why I need to know, so I respond jokingly that I typically ask before the first date so I can know who my murderer is, but we're beyond that, and now I simply want to know who I'm dating. It takes him a while to respond, but he sends it finally, and then doesn't text again for a while. I keep my promise to myself and don't social media stalk him. I tell some friends who start to seem hesitant about me meeting him again. Date 2. I show up at the restaurant, my choice, and it's pretty empty, so there's plenty of parking right up front. I park and wait. I see another car pull in, assuming it's him. He drives past all the open spots, my car included, which he knows because he walked me to it after date 1. He parks over at the side of the building, gets out, walks past my car, and texts that he saw me in the lot. It seemed a little awkward, but I ignored it. We enjoyed the date and spend an hour and a half talking on and off until the restaurant closes. We discussed where in the city we live, general directions, and the fact that we lived in those areas our entire lives. We also discussed social media, and he claims that he has no social media account. This should have been a red flag, since the app takes Facebook. Although the conversation was much better, I wasn't sure that I was ready to tell him that I wanted to see him again, so I figured I would go home and think about it. He walks me to my car, but walks uncomfortably close behind me. I ignore this and turn to awkwardly hug him and say my goodbye. I don't open the car until he's walked away after a bit of a pause. I leave and get out on the road to head home. There aren't many cars in that area as it's a heavily restaurant-laden area and most are closing for the night. I get up to the main road I'd need to turn down to go the direction I live, and notice the car behind me gets into the turn lane. I was not going home because I actually wanted to make a quick stop at the grocery store to grab some items I needed for dinner the following night. The light turns red and they sit extremely far back. I look in my mirror and realize it's him. No big deal. I'm sure it was just a coincidence that he was going this way. There are other stores this way as well. I refuse to become paranoid and overthink things, so I get up to the intersection the store is at and note that he's still in the far lane, so I hop into the left-hand turn lane to get to the store and notice he cuts over 2 lanes to get behind me. That seemed odd, but maybe he didn't know where the entrance to this shopping center is. Still a really odd coincidence that he'd be coming this way, especially without seeing a text or something acknowledging he's behind me. I mean, we're the only 2 cars on the road. I pull into the store and note that he pulls in 1 row before I do. I decide to do a loop around the lot and pull back out onto the service road. I slowly drive back to the main road, noticing he gets out of his car and scans the parking lot. Not a casual scan, like, is there a better parking spot? But a prolonged, where are you? Scan. I get back on the road and drive all the way to another out-of-the-way grocery store that I actually used to work at, knowing it's a safe place that will be on a more heavily populated end of town, with some friends who will be there to make me feel safe. Needless to say, I haven't heard from him since, and I think he knows I know. It took me a while, but I found his social media. His first name was not what he told me. I dug through my texts with him until I found a screenshot he'd sent me of an Instagram page, which listed mutual followers. Another red flag I should have remembered. He obviously had an Insta. I started digging through the accounts listed until I find one that's not private and find his profile. This leads to the ability to reverse Google image until I find his Facebook, which has a different first name and a city that's nowhere near where he claimed he lived. Time to delete my dating profile again. This happened about 5 years ago, and I've never had the chance to tell many people about the level of crazy that happened that evening. I met a guy on a dating app, of course, and we chatted a few days on text. I was getting very normal vibes from the conversations, so I agreed to meet up. His profile had him living in the town next to mine. We set the date and time at a local bar or restaurant, and it was only about 5 to 10 minutes from my home. I was getting into the car, and he texted me to tell me that he was running late because he was driving home from Pittsburgh. Now, that is at least a 5-hour drive from where I live. At any point in this entire time frame, do you think that he could have mentioned it earlier in that 5 hours that he was likely driving? So he said he needed to push it back, and I agreed. Red flag number 1. I got to the bar at the time we moved it back to, and he was not there yet. I get a text telling me that he was 15 minutes away and to order him a drink. Order and pay for your drink? Red flag number 2. I was chatting with a couple next to me at the bar, and I had already decided to finish my drink and then leave. I did not order his drink, by the way, and all of a sudden, he shows up. He was reeking of cigarette smoke when I had put no smokers on my profile. Red flag number 3, but figured that he was there and at least see what happens. He wanted to move to a more quiet area of the bar, so we moved to the other side. No big deal. He is acting really erratic, and then he says that we should dance. No one is dancing, so no. He put his hand on my head and pulled my bangs back and said,
I just want to see your whole face.
Okay, dude, get off me. Red flag number 4. Some friends and coworkers of mine showed up and went to sit on the other side of the bar. I introduced them and figured that was it. This psycho kept asking me for cigarettes that I did not have, kept bumming them off of people as he went outside, and I knew I was done. I actually knew at the beginning of the night, but was already there. I asked for the bar tab and it was $80, but decided to suck it up and pay it myself while he was outside, and then try to leave. I know the bartenders and figured the guy would stiff them, so I did not want to leave without paying. I went over to my friends to say goodnight, and one was pretty drunk and asked me to drop him off at home, since it was literally right on my way anyway. I agreed, and we started to head out. Psycho dude comes in just in time to see me leaving and asks what's going on. I told him I was leaving and giving a coworker a ride home. It was a male coworker, and I am female. He looked at me like I killed his puppy and walked right back out the door of the smoking area side of the bar. Red flag number 1,000,000 at this point. The bartenders and manager had been watching his interactions all night and told us that they were going to escort us to my car. So we get in the car and drive the coworker home. On the way, I am blasted by calls and texts from Psycho Dude telling me that I need to drive him home and to come back. I'm like, WTF? However you got there, you can use that to get home or call an Uber. He kept texting, so I blocked him. I woke up in the morning and curiously looked at the blocked texts, and I had one that was sent around 9 a.m. that said,
"Hello, beautiful. Had a great time. And you give nice hugs."
I'm not sure what was wrong with him, but holy hell, of course, I never spoke to him again.